Welcome to another installment of Demystifying Hebrew. And this time, and I know it's been quite a while since I put one of these out. Unfortunately, like everything, it takes time, and sometimes we get busy with other things, especially with having to put out a weekly recording. But in any case, this time I want to speak about dictionaries. I get asked a lot about dictionaries and what I think is the better dictionary to be used for students who speak English, specifically for English. For all those Spanish speakers out there that keep on contacting me about Spanish and Hebrew, I cannot help you out. I'm really sorry about that. And the thing that comes up a lot in questions is, what's a good dictionary to be used when you learn Hebrew? Now, obviously, when people take actual lessons, when I teach, obviously there are tutorings of how to use dictionaries, and also individual studies when we read and everything to develop a vocabulary. But when people sit down to do personal studies or studies at home, regardless if they have a teacher or not, there is always this question: what is the better dictionary that actually exists? Now, just from the get-go, and I'm going to get a few people upset here, but just from the get-go, the lexicon known as the Strongs is not a dictionary. It is a book that's its entire intention is to use the King James translation to the Bible, which is not a very good translation, and basically equate based on numbers what is the word that you have in front of you and what is the English equivalent of that. The King James translation is a translation that does have some merit to it because it's an English translation of the Bible, and in many cases most of the words are correct, but there are many cases as well where the translation is based on some idea or principle or some other source for the Bible, like the Greek translation, anything like that. And the problem with the Strongs is that it doesn't really help you understand what the word really is in Hebrew. The classic case that keeps on showing up, for example, is this whole translation of Aviv as green ears, where today we know that Aviv is not what we call green ears. It's a completely different stage. So you have to be very, very careful with that book. And I personally don't even use it. I mean, I've seen copies that I've sat down to look at it. And for me, as a person who teaches Hebrew, that was not a tool to teach Hebrew. It's more for people who only speak English and only want to work with English, and also want to specifically depend on the King James translation, which, in my opinion, is not a very good one. In any case, so now that I've annoyed a whole bunch of people and they've switched off the video and now they're going to do something completely different, let's get to actual dictionaries. So first of all, there are two types of dictionaries, two basic types of dictionaries that exist. One type of dictionary is a dictionary that uses the root system. Basically, it tries to find, or it presents the root of a word and then gives you the possible uses of that word. A classic example of such a dictionary is this famous book, The Brown Driver's Briggs. One of the classic books. They have a lot of notes here about comparing Hebrew to a few other Semitic languages. Since this book came out in the early 1900s, there have been a lot of developments in this field, and therefore the Brown Driver Briggs, though it's a very relevant book, does have to undergo some renovation. And in truth, what they're doing now, there are two professors from the university in Texas who are been commissioned to redo the BDB and add things. It's going to be basically an open source for scholars. If you are a scholar and you want to contribute from your knowledge, you can actually add it in, but it's not going to be open for anyone to start making comments. But first of all, how does exactly this dictionary work? So first of all, it's referred to as I would say, more of a lexicon than anything else. And earlier I said that the Strong's lexicon, it's actually not a lexicon. It is a concordance, and a concordance is not a dictionary. It can take you so far when it comes to interpreting words. Obviously, the prints that exist are not very good prints, and you can actually see from this. This is considered to be very, very low quality Hebrew font and everything. But the dictionary itself is a very, very good dictionary. or the lexicon to be more truthful. And the difference between a lexicon and a dictionary is a lexicon actually goes into etymology and so on, where a dictionary just defines words. The mechanism they use, as I said earlier, is the mechanism of finding the root, which makes it a little bit more difficult for people who are beginner students. And there's a lot of fuss about finding the roots of words and everything. It's only really one part of the entire discussion of how to use words and how to find words and understand them, context being a much more important key in this whole field. But the whole idea is that the BDB, being an old book, is still a very, very good and relevant book. It actually gives you a lot of insight of what words are and some references to other places. They have references to verses. So it's actually a very, very good book. Obviously, it has its faults like any other dictionary that exists out there. Another dictionary exists, which is a dictionary from the other side of dictionary writing, which is what's known as the Klein's dictionary, which is this. In my case, I have the Concise Dictionary of Classical Hebrew. This is the concise version. There's actually a version of this that is an 8-volume book, which is much, much better, and it has a lot more details. But the thing about this one is that unlike the BDB, what they do here is they try to work off of not the root system, but the actual word. So what they do is they give you a word, and it really cuts a lot of the work. You actually find the word with its vowel points and everything, because words undergo different inflections. They can actually look a little different when you look them up as a root, or that they are considered to be a subcategory of another root, or can belong to some root that you never even imagined actually that part of that word. So these are two very important dictionaries that exist for the study of Hebrew for English speakers. There are also dictionaries, like for example, historical dictionaries or etymological dictionaries. There's a dictionary known as the Etymological Dictionary of the Hebrew Language, which was produced somewhere in the 90s. I wouldn't say it's a very good dictionary. I've personally found very little use with it. But for people who want to find, again, individual words and kind of decipher the basic meaning of a word, that book could be very, very useful, but it's not really an etymological dictionary. What you're looking for for an etymological dictionary is a dictionary like, for example, the Historical Dictionary of Semitic Languages, or the Historical Dictionary of Hebrew, which some of these dictionaries also feature on my website. You can actually download them for free because these are books that their royalties have expired, or that the owner himself has no problem with people putting this up as a PDF. And these are dictionaries that really go in deeper in comparing Hebrew to other languages and enable you to understand the etymology even better, and more background how it's actually used in other languages. Now, as a dictionary that's more for Hebrew speakers, one that came out several years ago and is always on my shelf, is this dictionary, which was produced by Menachem Tzvi Kedari. It was a project that was started many years ago, and only really came to fruition somewhere in 2007. They published this book, and it's more for Hebrew speakers. Again, it's more historical. It works in the root system, but also individual words if the root is a bit more complex to work on. And what we actually have in this dictionary is a much more concise understanding of the Hebrew language from a Hebrew perspective. The big plus about this type of book and other historical books is that they actually take into consideration other Semitic languages like Syriac, which is a type of Aramaic, Akkadian, Sumerian, and so on. Now, I think out of all the dictionaries that exist out there for English speakers, one of the best dictionaries is known as the Halot, the Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon of the Old Testament. It's an expensive book. The cheapest you can find is if you buy it as a digital version, which is still somewhere in the $150 area. But it is literally one of the best dictionaries that can exist because it really combines everything. It enables you to type in a word. If you use the digital version, it enables you to type in a word, and it finds it for you, or it finds anything that's associated with it. It goes into comparative studies. It goes into dictionary, into etymology of words, background of words. So really, out of many of the dictionaries that exist out there, the Halot is actually one of my favorites. The problem is it's expensive. It was an expensive product to work on, and it's very expensive as a book. But still, if you really, really want to commit as an English speaker to the study of biblical Hebrew, this will be your dictionary. Above, if your dilemma is to buy, a whole bunch of dictionaries or that one dictionary, I would strongly recommend the Halot, because it really is a very, very good tool. And really, if you buy it off of platforms that you can use, and I'm not being paid to advertise any one of these companies, so I'm not going to mention them either, but really, if you buy it together with a platform of studies, one of these companies that produces basically different types of tools to study the Bible, you can link them. So for example, you can start looking up words if they appear here, and you can start linking all your tools together. And a lot of teachers that I know who are more of the English background, unlike me, I come from a Hebrew speaking background, they use this tool to find things very quickly, and I think it's a wonderful tool. Obviously, as a scholar, I say being a scholar means that you actually know the information, and you're not going to start relying on your computer. Being a scholar means that you also know the knowledge, but I'm not putting anyone down here. I'm just saying that make sure you actually do learn the words themselves, and you do learn the material that you study, and actually try to commit it to memory, because one day you might not have your computer and things like that can really limit your understanding of things. But we've looked at the BDB, which is a wonderful book. It's just very old, outdated. We looked at the Kleins, which again is relatively old as well. And the version that most people can get a hold of is the version which is the concise version. We've mentioned some etymological dictionaries or comparative dictionaries, which are wonderful tools for people who have the time to sit down and start looking up these words based on their roots and understanding how these appear in other languages as well. So this is more for the language buffs than people who actually want to learn specifically Hebrew. We mentioned an Israeli dictionary that came back in 2007, which is a wonderful tool for Hebrew speakers. And the pinnacle, for me at least, out of all these dictionaries is the Halot, which is, as I praised it earlier, is a wonderful, wonderful tool. So this is a few tips for dictionaries that you might consider or want in your library. The Strong's is nice for real beginners, but again, you have to be very careful with the definitions they use there, because it's strongly, the way I understood it, is strongly based on, it's very strongly and strong, but it's strongly based on the King James version of the Bible, which is not necessarily a good version. And the next video is going to be about Bibles. What could be a good Bible for a student? So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to try to pump these out a little bit more in the near future. I know I make this promise all the time, but this time I'm really into wanting to push these videos a little bit more. And obviously, somewhere in the future, we're going to do actual studies of words, kind of like to get people used to the idea of how do you do this. But obviously, if you want to really study Hebrew, you can sign up to my Hebrew classes. I have several versions of these, light classes, heavier classes, and I also have a Bible class which can expose you a lot to the study of the Hebrew Tanakh from the Hebrew language itself. But this is a class for English speakers, and not expensive at all either. So it's kind of like an economy price type of thing. And if you're interested, you can contact me at HebrewInIsrael@gmail.com, and do not forget to visit my website, HebrewInIsrael.net. Thank you.